And all right. We should be rolling live to all channels. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us again today for another live edition of This Week in Drones. And while we are live, we love hearing from you, your comments, your questions, and of course, highlighting special guests each week that bring a different perspective, a unique take on the drone industry, what's happening right now, the market shifts in the industry, the regulations that are coming out. We've been talking a lot about the BVLOS NPRM on here, how it affects different stakeholder groups. What are the technologies that enable drone operations? And so we're going to deep dive that even more so today with a couple brilliant ladies, all three. I'm surrounded by women in this aviation industry that have just had incredible impact over the last few decades, right? With MITRE, with the FAA, and all sorts of business, Drone Up, all sorts of incredible scalable business models. So with that said, we're going to do some introductions. We'll get into the main topic, but I'd love to hear your comments. Please send in your thoughts, your comments, your questions for these ladies today. Wow, we've got them on the hook. We've got them here live. And, Amy can speak in depth into the business model side of things. As you saw in the title, we're talking about having the business chops to scale your drone operations. And how is the new NPRM going to impact that? And what are the comments that you might want to insert for that? And Abby Smith, of course, is going to bring a whole side of technology regarding remote ID and regulations. And, I'll let you guys, I don't want to speak for you, but, feel free to ask questions around that, around the technology, about the regulations. And then, of course, the brilliant Michelle Duquette, all things interoperability, integrating drones into the national airspace, right? I could go on and on. Enterprise, drone integration. So with that said, Amy, I'll let you kick it off. And then, Abby as well. But just, I want to hear about you, a little bit about your background, and, speaking to that business chops side of the house of how do you scale drone operations? Because you've had some pretty incredible success in that world. So just let people, share who you are to the folks out there.
Right. Okay. I'll kick started. I'm Amy Wigand, and I have been in the industry for about 12 years now. I started in general aviation. I ran a flight school, and part of that was to build programs of opportunity when fleet utilization was down. At that time, I worked with special elite military teams in the Norfolk, Virginia area, and we trained those teams how to pass the private pilot knowledge test in a few weeks. It was pretty incredible. At the same time, we were talking commercial ops. This is 2014, 2015, and I built a program before Part 107 dropped to train folks on how to adapt to Part 107. It became simply successful within the state of Virginia, and was called by a few people to come in and take a look and help them build their businesses. One of those was helping Walmart with their innovation program. And that was super impactful to my career as well as to my learning, always a student, as I say. So one of the things that, I've had the fortunate opportunity to be a part of Enterprise for the last 10 years and how Enterprise is developing. And so I think, when we're talking market shifts, I'm going to just dive right in here. We're going to see that Enterprise is going to adopt. This is going to become mainstream in Enterprise. I think, the economic drivers for them are regulations and even ESG or the environmental societal governance stuff that's going on. And we also have to understand that they're not only adopting our technology, which is crucial to all the wonderful things we know: speed, risk reduction, the list goes on, safety, efficiency, all of those value props. We also have to understand that digital transformation is the name of the game within these big enterprise houses. And their pain isn't seeing that they need us. It's the totality of this digital transformation. And so we have to be mindful of that, but keep plugging with them and keep talking to them and realizing what the problems they need to solve. Thomas Butler with Dominion at ComUAV Expo just said, multi-sources of data is going to be huge. So this is going to be an economic driver for those of us who sit in operations and are selling into these enterprise accounts. Public safety reliance is going to be huge. The market's just going to shift. Public safety is going to be a big deal. Delivery growth in medical, we're going to talk about that a little bit here today. And also, obviously, with global hardware realignment, we're going to need to take some pivots and take a look at how we can best adapt to those changes. Obviously, the technology, we're going to see civil interest growth, which means UTM is going to be more broadly adapted. On the government military side, UTM is there. Drone dominance, you've heard that language. Well, the commercial side is adopting that and has been adopting that, and that's only going to get stronger. Multi-drone ops is obviously in the conversation. We have to take a look at that. And mission type platforms are going to be of interest if they're not already. And obviously, sense and avoid, DAA, detect and avoid, those are going to be huge for you. Mission specific drones, pay attention. And then obviously, again, going back to UTM and that shared airspace and interoperability with eVTOLs and crewed aircraft. To master that, understand data platforms and autonomy workflows, and you're good. But obviously, the kicker here is regs. Once we can get past regs, we are going to have that 10x we promised our investors. And we're going to see inspections, again, delivery, public safety, persistence, and monitoring. These things are going to become more mainstream. And even, I know it's like a bad word, remote ID. I know. It feels like this compliance overhead that everybody's talking about, but we will be able to see nefarious actors. And I want Abby to talk about this a little bit more. It's going to become a foundational element and part of the ecosystem of technology we need to use. So in building those programs of value, we really need to leverage all of these different opportunities to scale and have conversations around this. And don't even get me started in training, which I'd like to talk about before the end of this conversation. But Abby, let's talk about why that remote ID conversation is going to be important, not only to interoperability, but also the IoT of things. I contradicted myself, the IoT.
And Abby, if you don't mind too, if you could share a little bit about AX Enterprises as well, as because I really like to understand with everything, Amy, that you shared, including the remote ID aspect, where these test sites are playing a role,
yes.
How they have up to this point, and then as new regulations are pending, as they come out and they're locked in, and now we now need to play within those rules. I'd love to hear a little bit of context around that. And I know both of you guys work, with AX as well, and advise and help expand what they're doing. And so, as you share, Abby, some of your background, I'd love to hear just a little taste about that, just kind of some of the nuance of kind of where that space is today and where you think these test sites are going to be valuable and key, as we test the new regulations and kind of start coming up with new waivers, perhaps within those new rules, as Amy or as Michelle has been sharing in the last few episodes, that we're still going to need waivers, but you need these places where you can go to, in some ways, like test the limits in a positive way, right? As we innovate, as we continue to innovate, we need places to go do that and try to kind of test these and flex these and then work on where we need adjustments. So anyway, with that, thank you so much, Amy. Abby, can you just share again, like a little bit of background for context for listeners, a little bit about AX and where it fits in, and then, share about the technology as well.
Yes, David, thank you, and Michelle, for having me on. TWD. I learned a new acronym to name. I had not thought about. I was like, This Week in Drones, and I'm looking at your hat, and I was like, what's TWD? And I'm like, ah. So thanks. Great to be here. So a little bit about my background. I've got 35 years of aviation experience. I guess if you add that up, that means that I'm not on the younger side. I'm the second half of my life. My aviation experience is broad. I started as an air traffic controller. I've been an accident investigator at the National Transportation Safety Board. I've helped set up major air traffic systems integration work, especially in the en route domain. I've been an integral part of designing and developing the Air Traffic Organization Safety Management System, training for air traffic controllers, engineers, and technicians. I was the director of that. Executive director for aviation policy and plans. They really looked at the economic analysis of any regulation that we're proposing or that we were finalizing for consumption by the United States. And most contemporarily in my career in federal service, I was deeply involved as the deputy executive director for UAS integration and then the executive director for UAS and advanced air mobility security. So really, so it's Amy's a hard act to follow because I just felt like I was listening to a CNN report on market analysis. So I'm going to do my best here. So Amy had specifically asked me about remote ID, and remote ID is, to her point, one of those regulations that was really tough. And remote ID was being finalized when I was the executive director of aviation policy and plans. And we adjudicated over 50,000, that's right, 50,000 comments on that particular regulation. Many of them had, we'll call, salty language in them and didn't really provide solutions. And so the first tip I have for you when you're thinking about business chops is comment on regulations that may impact you. Now, granted, this current notice of proposed rulemaking for Part 108, which is around BVLOS operations for operators and manufacturers and civil aviation, it's a long one. And it also is combined with Part 146 that is for what we've called in the past UAS traffic management. Now we've got a new acronym, ADSPs. And this is about the technologies that are used to enable beyond visual line of sight operations. Enter the remote ID point. So the temptation is going to be, if you see something in this regulation, just say, oh, I don't agree with that. Well, that's not helpful for policymakers to make policy that's enabling. Talk about specifically what the impact is on your organization when you can add dollars, time, safety. This makes your argument reasonable, rational, and adjudicatable. It's a lot better than I hate this or I think this is great. It's wonderful for people's ego when they write a regulation for someone to say, I think this is great. Tell them why and what the impact is and why they should keep it as is. Finally, if you have a better solution, offer specific language. Help them help you. But back to the story about remote ID. Remote ID is mentioned in a number of places in this new regulation, as well as in the existing Part 89, as it is in the CFR. And as implemented currently, remote ID is not very useful, and people roll their eyes. A lot of commercial operators think that this is payload that's just for law enforcement or other need-to-know organizations such as the FAA and doesn't provide them any use. And part of that was because during that rulemaking, network remote ID was taken off the board between the notice of proposed rulemaking and the final rule. Why? Because it wasn't ubiquitous across the United States. And so you couldn't ask somebody to be in compliance with a rule that you couldn't be in compliance with. It didn't make sense. It's a great idea. What's interesting about that is it doesn't say you can't use it, but it's not required. And I think that's an important piece. Now, in this current proposed rule, it says that you need to use remote ID and your remote ID broadcast needs to say beyond visual line of sight. But the problem with remote ID is it's spoofable. It's not really usable. You could create a swarm with the same remote ID. And so there's not a lot of trust that you're getting use out of it. Plus, there's privacy concerns. So you asked me to talk about AX a little bit. So AX has got some really great engineers. There's some really genius folks there. And they're one of my strategic partners, and they're one of Amy's strategic partners as well. AX came up with this concept called trusted multifaceted remote ID. I know that's a mouthful. TMRID. It's another acronym to add to TWD. But anyway, TMRID is basically a concept of operation that's being developed and tested at AX and other partners, and is being worked through standards bodies. What this is going to enable is a trusted remote ID, not like the current state. How is it trusted? Well, it's authenticated. Essentially, the remote ID, the way that this internet string works is it sends a message that says, I am who I say I am. And it's encrypted. Well, yes, okay, you say, well, hackers could get in. Yeah, but you're going to need to have your pocket quantum computer in order to hack into it. So it's very durable. One of the requirements in 89 was have a durable remote ID and so this is really durable. And then the part about privacy that's really been a beef in the recreational and private users world has been about, I don't really want people to know who I am, where I'm at. And so this enables encryption of your ground control station so that you're masked, but not to law enforcement or FAA or people that really have a need to know. But on an individual basis, none of the rest of us need to know where someone is operating a drone. And in fact, there's been a lot of challenges since the onset of that original reg where people have been hurt, where they've been, and particularly police officers have been attacked because people find their ground control station. So TMRIB solves this. The coolest part, and this is really great for both people that want personal privacy and for police or firefighters or first responders or commercial ops, is this concept of single session IDs. In the original rule, this was really undeveloped. But what it is essentially is, it's a new license plate for you every time you fly. So, but that license plate is linked to your registration. So if you don't want people to follow your flight path, if you don't want people saying, oh, I know that is a firefighting drone, I'm going to go disrupt it. I know that's Amy Wiegand and I want to go mess with her, because there's a new remote ID every time a flight goes out. And this is a capability that's enabled by TMRID. Currently being worked for the Internet Engineering Task Force. That's the international body of standards that governs the internet. They're very supportive of this. Also being worked by ASTM, a good friend to the drone industry. And ICAO wants to adopt this, not just for drones, but for all things aviation. So I just said a lot. I'm going to stop filibustering. Thanks.
No, that's great. I think that's a good example of working within and throughout existing regulations, seeing what's workable about them, where the gaps are, and coming up with solutions. Like, to your point, you can do it through comments. And I really like your concept of saying, don't just say good job on that, but say good job because it will help enable us to do X, Y, and Z, and we'll make 10 times the amount of money, at economic impact, positive, good. Or the inverse, it takes away our revenue and it disallows us from doing the X, Y, Z. Can you reword it this way to include us? Brilliant on that. But also with the remote ID element, TMRID, that's an example of how those listening, any of us can get creative and work within the technologies that are available and actually match and create a solution that solves 3 or 4 or 5 points. So I think that's a great takeaway overall. Great job on that. Michelle, you came off mute, and I actually did want to pass it to you as well to just share kind of your overall take, as well as we kind of come up to, there's a few more questions I want to dive into here, but go for it.
Sure. So I think that there is a pedigree with these developers that is very, very deep in defense. Creativity. I don't have the creativity, right? I couldn't just come up with something like this. So there's a pedigree there that maybe you guys can talk a little bit about, how is it that they have had the experiences and the deep technical depth to be able to even come up with something that kind of takes that next level of, beyond encryption. Let's look at, it's kind of like frequency hopping and spectrum. It's how do we get that randomness built into the remote ID concept? How did, where does that come from? Can you tell a
And
little
ho-
bit
and how
about
do you
them?
develop that too into an organization, right? Because that's kind of part of
Yeah.
that business aspect. Amy, maybe you can help speak to as well, as folks are listening and they have their folks they on their team. But how did you build that expertise, to Michelle's point, and how would you advise, that others who are listening should take similar steps, right?
Yeah, it's the technical chops and definitely the business chops. They both have to come together.
Well, they do. And I'd like Abby to speak to it. She's worked with AX much longer and knows the engineering team a lot better. I want her to speak to that. But also, I have a question for her. And it seems to me, Abby, that you're not really talking about a product, more of a philosophy that's been built by AX Enterprise within their suite of tools. And I'd really love to hear more about that and you to give that engineering shine that they so well deserve.
So I think I've got like 7 questions that's been built between the 3 of you. So feel free to pop in and go, oh, wait, don't forget about this. So there was one thing that I just wanted to add. And David, it was really to your original question about what does this mean for scaling? So I know Michelle and part of in her business really works with companies creating sandbox and building ecosystems and enterprises. And one of the really important things that this trusted multifaceted remote ID that's going through a process, and it's kind of, if you were a Gen Zer, you would say the DRIP protocol sounds cool, but other people say, oh, DRIP, that's not cool. But DRIP is actually very hip for the Gen Z, but it stands for Drone Remote ID Protocol. And one of the things that I was thinking about, especially because we were talking about cross-border operations when when Amy first teed it off, is the absolute necessity for Customs and Border Patrol and Mounties on the other side in Canada to know definitively this is who they say it is. That's important for commercial operators, especially as they're getting to their destination or returning on mission, to have with certainty that I know this is my aircraft and it hasn't been spoofed and is pretending to be me. So I think that's one of the really cool innovations. But coming back to the question about how did they develop this talent? AX Enterprise was founded by 2 really genius women, Patricia Bassinger, goes by Pat, Mary Carol Helen Krashicki, who goes by MC, and I call her MC Hammer because she's tough and brilliant. So they started off in the Air Force Research Lab and just as mad scientists themselves. I mean, and then broke off and went to Northrop Grumman, went to some other think tanks, and they said, wait a minute, we can do this for ourselves and we can be more agile. So when you think about the A, I think agility as they developed this. While they were at AFRL, they actually helped develop the original internet. And they met one of their engineers, who's one of the people that came up with this protocol, Stu Card, who is part and parcel to helping come up with this protocol. So together, these people built friendships. They recognized each other's talents and said, along the way, stayed in touch. And so I think one of the key business chops things, I'm going to like pivot and talk a little business, is when you know good people who have good ideas, bring them with you. Even if it's just part-time, even if it's hey, I need you ad hoc. Hey, let's be on retainer. Hey, let's start a business together. Or hey, come work for me. Keep those people with you, because then Stu has created proteges and they've found other people along the way. We haven't even talked about their amazing UAS service supplier called Clue, which provides strategic deconfliction and airspace awareness through the Sapphire protocol that is being used successfully in the near-term approval process ahead of Part 146 rulemaking, successfully with some business partners.
So that's a DoD program, right?
It started as, But one of the really interesting things is it's part of dual use. And so it's encouraged to not it. So DoD originally wanted it to scale interoperability with civilian aviation and or civilian drones in the ecosystem, and to check their perimeters, but also manage within their bases. But it's also can be in a separate format, that's its own iteration, a commercial product. And so it's really cool that they've leveraged. I think they started developing this product back in 2015 or 2016. So they've had a lot of years to really refine and hone it. And I'm really proud of them, because this particular product for airspace awareness, strategic deconfliction, is one of only 3 in the NTAP process that's good for both the strategic deconfliction, oh my gosh, conformance management, but also, Amy, help me with the acronym. It stands for DSS, and I want to call it something else than what it's actually called, but it's around the data. And so Wing, Zipline, and AX are the only 3 that have those 2 capabilities in the NTAP, the near
The
term
data
approval
service supplier.
process. Yeah.
So
Yep.
actually, I'd love to hear Abby or Amy from the business side talk a little bit more about bringing the right people to the table, staying in touch with them. Loved that about how do you just keep them, keep that relationship warm. And even if you can't bring on a full-time hire, whatever it looks like, how do you stay collaborative with people and tap them for their insights, but, give them what you have to give them. Meanwhile, the FAA, others have had some churn, and there's brilliant minds, that are hitting the market even today, right? That are probably some of all of y'all's good friends. That how do people interact with them and make sure that they stay, they keep that relationship warm? And I don't know, just strategy. Like, this is a huge market shift that we've just seen, right? With like so much mind share hitting the open market.
Right.
What should folks out there? How should they think about this? How should they stay engaged with these people?
Yeah. So I think leveraging your networks is super important, but there's a difference between leveraging your networks and leveraging your echo chamber. And I think folks have to get a little uncomfortable and go outside the box and talk to people that, maybe they wouldn't normally talk to. For me, I lifted my consultancy 2 years ago, and I've been getting business on referrals. I haven't had to do any advertising. One of those referrals with Abby Smith, I took her out to breakfast. There's a funny story behind there. We'll tell everybody one day. But we didn't really know each other. We knew of each other working together, but it was through another person, Kenji Sagahara, Director of Aviation of Oregon. He paired us. He said, you guys need to know each other. And so we went out to breakfast, and as they say, the rest is history. And now, Abby and I network together and strategically look at how we can help people with our talents. She's got a certain set of talents. I have a certain set of talents. Michelle's the same. And we talk to each other about how we can help each other grow not only our own businesses, but ourselves. Again, always a student. So leveraging those networks is super important, but I really, really would love to see people getting a little uncomfortable and going outside their echo chambers if they're not, and happy to have those conversations too.
What do you advise folks from a marketing perspective? So I think that there is a whole play there when people are curating marketing that would be that part of that is doing what you just said. You have any suggestions for these folks? Because a lot of them are IT folks, and they're engineers. They've been heads down for like ever,
Right.
and now it's time to start curating some talent that is a little bit different than what they've normally been doing. Do you have any recommendations for that?
Boy, that's a whole series, Michelle. Are you willing to hire me for that one? Because I'd love to have that conversation. The skinny is OpenAI is not your marketing director, but it's a great tool for an authority in marketing. However, I see a lot of people spending money too soon. They're doing it too fast. They're not understanding their audiences. And a lot of people think, well, I've got this TAM and like this 4 billion people are my audience, when really maybe only 1 to 5 million of them are, and they're not going out correctly to the audience. That's a huge recommendation. Really if you're not getting traction, really take a look at how you're going out to your audience, where you're going, where you're spending your money. Again, I could talk about that all day long, but if you don't have the right audience with the right messaging, you're going to make missteps and pitfalls. It's going to affect profitability in the long run. You're not going to get there as fast.
Do you have any examples of that? Because I know you've told me some pretty wild stories of success. I don't know what all you can or would like to share here, but I mean, any maybe if you have an example of maybe a third party story of where they missed it, and maybe one of your pretty incredible stories of how you guys have been able to target so specifically your ideal customer, create huge accounts. I mean, again, I don't know if you can drop names or whatever you'd like to share, but like any kind of concrete stories I think would really help people tap into some of your knowledge on that.
Right. Well, I can't drop names, but I can say there's a huge retailer and a huge telecom provider that I've worked with and helped implement impactful conversations with. And again, we did an audit. We looked at what was going on. We looked at how we tactically market to these folks. And it's more than just marketing. You have to have your revenue ops team aligned. You can't have silos. You've got to have sales, marketing, product services, and your customer service people aligned. You have to be talking. Everybody has to be growing the product together. And that's really crucial from an internal perspective for the marketer, but also for the entire team. That's your revenue generation operations team. And that's how I like to look at it. Now, it works different for different companies, for sure. But if you just holistically look at it like that, it makes a lot more sense. And so, yes, we've done some things that all evolve around auditing that audience and looking at the messaging. And what a lot of people do, especially in the tech space, we've got brilliant engineers, as you said, Michelle, and brilliant tech people. They want to talk about the features. They want to talk about the features of their products because they're so proud of what they built. And yes, we want to talk about those features, but we want to talk about them at the right time. What we need to talk about first is the problems we solve for our customers. And I know that sounds so cliche, but it's really the truth. And then what are those problems? Is doing something faster, better, more efficient, with less risk reduction, really their problem? Maybe not. In some cases, it was digital transformation and how they worked through that at their operating expense level. So that was the real pain. And so how do we talk to them about the real pain? Super crucial. So I'll pause there because I could talk about this all day.
That's so cool. Yeah, I love what you just said there. That was really, really interesting. Yeah, and sometimes that happens to me while I'm out and about selling radars and whatever. Sometimes people show interest, but I forget to ask, what is the problem you're trying to solve with this, system, right? And once in a while, sometimes I do a good job at that, but once in a while, someone else asks me that question, and I realize, well, I don't know. They just said they want a radar to pick up the target, and they want to know it's there. It's like, and then we do that, great,
right.
But it's so much more insightful to understand, like, well, why, what is the outcome when you pick up the target? Where's that information going to go? Who's going to respond to it? Is it slow moving or fast moving? Is it because of this reason or that reason? And, you start to drill in and you realize there's just so much nuance that you discover when you take the time to ask. And then the more you learn, you can then align your next set of messages much better, to
Absolutely.
like, you're like, because you understand what's driving it, what's underneath, right? And,
well, a great example just happened again. I'm going to mention Thomas Butler, since he said it publicly at CommUV Expo on stage. They're looking for multiple different types of data sets through the data collection. And so as we move into Part 108 and look at data being the key to this, what we need to understand is what Thomas is saying. Okay, he needs multiple data sets. What are those multiple data sets? And then we have to solve for those. So that's a good example of definitely taking a look at what the customer needs and how you can solve their problems. So listening is the best sales skill, in my opinion, versus talking about features.
So that's also very, very applicable to the creativity process that we were talking about earlier.
Amen.
It's why those folks at AX Enterprise are so tuned in to what a solution does need to look like and what are the components behind it. It's because, you know, most of them have been there and done that, and they've got that nuanced context already. So, David, it's not like there's somebody new coming in and saying, you know, can you just do 1, 2, and 3 for me? And them giving them 1, 2, and 3 and it not really hitting the mark. It's that they know that when somebody says 1, 2, and 3, there is a whole litany of things that are behind it, surrounding it, supporting it, or affected by it. And I think that's the beauty of our experience and expertise in this whole environment, this whole industry, is being able to be creative that is a product of all of that learning. We've been learning by doing our entire careers. And so it's very cool when somebody smarter than I am is able to take all of it and kind of mix it up and give us something. Yes, that's on target. That's what we wanted.
That's great. Hey, I just want to highlight Jerry Green said the key question I always ask is, what's your mission? And,
Yeah.
you know, thanks, Jerry. I appreciate that. That's great. And that's cool, Michelle, because you can go to a team like Pat and MC and say, I want 1, 2, 3. And they might just say, that's interesting. What, you know, and ask questions and find out, well, actually, you only need 1 and 2, it sounds like. And there's a 4 you didn't realize, you know, right. And that's where that
Yes.
expertise can really speed things up. You can always go out and wing it and try to do things yourself by yourself and make your own mistakes. And sometimes you discover something no one else would have thought of. It's brilliant. Other times if it's speed to market, right? And it's,
Mhm.
or Amy, it's like, well, do I want to spend the money and time reaching out to 10 million people at the same time when only 1 million of them would ever care or ever buy from me? Like that's a lot, you know, more effective to drill in if you have the expertise. So speed to market, actually targeting the right folks, you're gonna probably be more successful more quickly that way. But Abby, I don't know if you came. Sorry, I think you came off mute a second ago. Did you? Right now.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, you know, thinking about first of all, this is a wonderful conversation, and so many times when you tune in to a podcast, it's all about just the technical what. It's not about the why, and it's not about the greater solution. And I think one of the things that's so interesting where we are in this ecosystem is it's just ripe for creativity. We've only scratched the surface of what drones, advanced air mobility, and robotics that are interoperable in multimodal can do for us. And so
Absolutely.
you had asked at the beginning about the value of the test site, because not only do they have this really creative software company, they are the stewards of the New York UAS test site at Oneida County. It's one of only 7 authorized test sites from the FAA by law. And there's a section in reauthorization of the Reauthorization Act of 2024. And again, I must sound like I'm like this total nerd.
You are.
Putting all these regulations. Well, thank you, Michelle. I resemble that. But the thing is these are foundational things that drive business chops, right? So
Yes.
having someone on your team that's tuned into that is really important to understand the art of the possible and the art of influence of what's not possible yet.
Yes.
So under
Agreed.
the section 44803, it really authorizes these 7, and it could be up to 9, but right now there's only 7 authorized to do things that others cannot do. They do not have the authority. And one of the really cool aspects of this is if you're operating in conjunction with by hiring a test site, such as the New York test site at Oneida County, run by AX or operated by the AX Enterprise, you have authority. They really can lighten the load of going through waiver processes as you bring your product, your innovative idea, that I can dream it, I can drone it idea to market, because they can operate under a special authority that treats the aircraft like it's a public aircraft because it's operating in conjunction with this public government sanctioned entity.
So say a little bit
And
more about that, Abs. Help folks understand like why they have that specialness about them, what that partnership with Oneida County, what that actually means for an FAA designated UAS test site.
yeah, well, what it means, Michelle, is so I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that when I said waiver, there was a giant eye roll and maybe a little had to swallow down some up the back of their throat because it's so much work. And you tear your hair out, and people hire consultants like me and Amy. We don't write waivers, but there's lots of consultants that do, and it's a whole industry because people are so overwhelmed. But it really lightens the burden on that because you can operate under an authority that actually says these are designated to be places that can safely, and safety is always paramount. And I know that the New York UAS test site has a very robust safety management system,
Agreed.
but they find a way to do things that are novel and give people the opportunity to build test hours, to try different things. I was just on a call earlier today with the test site team, and we were talking about a really interesting case that's very novel. And we were thinking of what our strategy is in order to get them up and testing. It was really fun. And
And
it's
they're
a very creative process. But for somebody that's scaling with a novel idea, I definitely recommend getting involved with the test site.
And
One
it's
thing
pretty like multifaceted, right? I mean, it's not just doing FAA work. It's not just doing DoD work. I mean, granted, they're at Griffiths and they've got this deep pedigree with defense, but I mean, they also do stuff like with the Oneida Nation, right? Or with like local law enforcement for marathons and stuff. Don't they do those
they
kinds of
and
things
they
too? Community
also
things?
Right, and they also work really closely with State University of New York at Syracuse, specifically the Upstate Medical, and really enabling their whole robotics program. They're flying robots, aka drones, that are in the process of doing a mad scale. In fact, they're involved in this near-term approval process to enable beyond visual line of sight ahead of Part 108 being codified as a rule. And they're doing that because they want to save lives. So SUNY had this problem, and they said, we can't get our laboratory work done fast enough. We can't get cancer medicine to patients fast enough because of traffic, because for a courier to pick something up and drive it even a mile across town could take an hour. In using drones, SUNY has cut their logistics time to get lab results by 19 minutes. Now, some of you may say that's not a lot of time, but if you're a logistician, that's an amazing innovation. And 19 minutes is if you think about the stroke patient or somebody that's in critical care, is life-saving. It's in the golden
Yeah,
hour.
yeah.
And so partnering with AX and the test site and Causey Aviation, getting this near-term approval process is going to enable them to do BVLOS operations to this incredible pathology center that's coming up to be online within the next year. It's 7 miles away from the hospital, and they'll be able to scale their operation and their lab results because they're at capacity right now in their
Mhm.
current location. And so it's literally life-saving technologies that these kind of clever thinkers coming up with UAS service supply tools like UTM, like strategic deconfliction, like airspace visualization, like TMRID, are going to save people's lives when
Yeah.
other people say, I have this novel idea of how to use these technologies.
So let's go back to the test site though. I mean, it, how does anybody get connected to them? I mean, can I just go to the test site and say, "Hey, I've got a drone and I want to do some cool stuff. Can I do it here?"
Amy, do you want to take that one?
So no, and yes. So what I would say is reach out to the New York UAS test site. There is a website for them, and they have a great team of people who can answer questions about what can fly. They literally have an indoor-outdoor scenario on a towered airport that is an amazing complex. So if you haven't or don't know of the New York UAS test site, simply Google that and you'll see how you can get in touch and get your testing underway.
Yeah, and just to build on what Amy said, AX Enterprise and New York UAS test site are linked to each other. So if you can see the logo at the bottom of the screen, you can get a hold of them. I would like to double down on something that I think is really cool about this particular test site, because they can really take you from concept to certification. And why do I say that? Well, if you have something and you're not even sure if you've got a radio frequency leakage, you can first start in their Sky Dome, which used to be a B-52 hangar, but they had the vision. Again, these are creative innovators. They reused a defunct B-52 hangar and turned it into this incredible crucible of innovation. There's a quantum lab that they're co-located with for quantum computing. And in this, it's mostly an anechoic chamber. It's not a full anechoic chamber, but it's mostly, so it creates a GPS denied environment. So if you're not sure, if you need to test for RF leakage, it's a safe place to do that. It's also a place where if you've got something that's really dicey about wondering about the safety case, doing it indoors where it's a much lower exposure is a great example for testing innovation of crawl, walk, run.
Let me emphasize that one more time.
Yeah,
They
please.
have this massive space that gives you anechoic capabilities. We don't have enough of those around the country. There's one in Rome, New York. Just wanted to foot stomp that.
And it's part of the test site. And so if you can graduate from that, but you're still not comfortable with letting your drone fly free, they can open up the side of the hangar and there's a cage. And so you can fly in outdoor, but completely caged in outdoor controlled environment. And so it really, and then their certificate of authority goes up to 17,999 feet. Now, granted, when we think about the current rule, that's not necessarily applicable, but they have clients that have category 5 drones, think really, really big, and they have category 1s, think the little ones, 55 pounds and under. So they have a vast level of experience and exposure in the ecosystem. So it's pretty cool. And it makes me proud to be a strategic partner.
It's great. I love this. One thing I wanted to go back to just quickly, I didn't want to interrupt the train of thought as you guys were rolling into that, but you mentioned something, Abby, on that use case with the blood delivery with drone that I thought was really interesting that they're enabling, of course, which is saving the 19 minutes, or it only taking 19 minutes to do it now instead of however long it take to drive a vehicle 7 miles in traffic. Or I forget what your stat was, but just creating speed of delivery by minutes was the key outcome that they were looking for, right? Other missions might not care about if it takes 2 hours or if it takes 10 minutes. They could care less, whatever it is, right? Maybe it's delivering toothpaste or something. They're like, well, it doesn't have to be there in 15 minutes to be in some golden window. It could take 2 hours. That's fine. So that was just an interesting nuance of, if you can get this blood to another location, get it tested, get it back, administer something now to a patient because they know whatever they're looking for, the blood type, or they know exactly what the ailment is, that much faster. They save however many lives a year that would have, maybe someone would have passed away or had something irreversible or been given the wrong medication. Who knows? Whatever the limit is, just so interesting. It just comes down to speed, at that point. And there's probably certain drones that are more capable than others to fly within that parameter, right? Like something else might be built for a heavy lift or for longer flights. maybe the battery's designed to fly much, much longer, but maybe they don't, maybe this one doesn't care about, I'm kind of making this up, but just to say, maybe they only want a battery that can go fast, and maybe it burns out and they have to, or, it uses up quickly, but they're like, that's fine. Our mission is fast. So anyway, food for
Yeah,
thought.
and you're absolutely right, David. And what I would say is, whether it's blood, whether it's a piece of organ tissue or skin, I guess skin is an organ. Erin, Michelle, you know me. Whatever the tissue is, get that speed and efficiency is really important. And it also, I want to foot stomp this, it takes cars off the road, which makes transportation more efficient and safer for people that aren't doing those kind of things. And when you talk about uh, and again, I have to just plug it in. Please comment responsibly on the notice to proposed rulemaking for Part 108 and Part 146. Rulemaking comments close on October 6th. It's
Mhm.
so important that everyone have a voice in their future. It's the beauty of democracy.
100% agree with that. Say it a million times again. Also, what you've been hearing from Amy as well is relevant for those NPRM comments. The FAA does want to understand where you have a business challenge with something that they're putting out, something that they're proposing. But again, not, they don't know what they don't know. And if it's something that's affecting you specifically and it's a painful whatever, I mean, who knows what it could be, but you think that it's going to affect your bottom line, please put it in there. Tell them why. And give them a suggestion on how they might tweak that so that it doesn't affect your bottom line quite so much.
Harry, didn't you say
Um,
you did economic analysis when you were at the FAA of what a rule, what a regulation might do when it's enacted or something? Is that
I was the executive director, the executive that I had a whole team of economists that did nothing but economic analysis of every rule. And so these comments are really important. And in fact, I wrote up a comment yesterday, and it was about part of this rule that talks about registration requirements under beyond visual line of sight versus Part 107, which is visual line of sight. Under recreational or visual line of sight, think Part 107, people register their drones online. They never have to talk to a person. You go and just saying you're a slow typer, the ROM time to do that is under 20 minutes, and it costs $5. Now, under the current proposal, it says because there are more fields than what's currently in Drone Zone, people need to use the paper process. That's Part 47. Well, so I ran the analysis, and in order to reach the scale, and I also did it, I did this because I care. I care about my former employer. I care about the National Airspace System. I care about people building their businesses in this ecosystem, and I want it to be successful. Manual processes are always tricky because there's transposition, there's reading. If people are writing and not typing, there can be errors. But I figured out the economics, and in order to scale this, I looked at probably the registry needing to hire anywhere between 30 to 120 more people. And I don't know where that money would come from, but I also, in a very conservative estimate, because I could have made it more hellacious. I wasn't interested in doing that, but it's a difference of 27 days in time to register, and 27 days time is money.
mhm.
And so I think that analysis is going to be gobsmacking for people when they read it. But I encourage each of you to look at your own business and say, as I look through this rule, this is what this impact could mean to me, and this is what it means economically. And time is money. And so that needs to be figured out into the equation. And those comments are taken very seriously. I assure you, I helped adjudicate comments and rules, and everyone is looked at and everyone is considered. And just based on the last rule that was called Mosaic, and it's for light sport aircraft, from what the notice of proposed rulemaking was to how the final rule was published, was dramatically shaped in a much more productive way from industry, because industry took the time to be thoughtful and
Mhm.
provide thoughtful comments.
That was great. That was super helpful, Abby. Thank you. Amy, did you have something to foot stomp over there?
I do. Let's like real basic here. Okay. The notice of proposed rulemaking closes October 6th. We know that. We've got 260 days. That's June. Given history, we probably have about 10 months to a year in this environment. It's really a great time. The silver lining is it's a really great time to understand your client, to understand your business model, to get your financial models tight, to understand your audiences and build the right messaging to how these changes are going to affect you. I think the demand and impact will rise for those that are, compliance proven experts or authorities that can scale operations. I think operations is the key word here, and leveraging your networks, getting outside your echo chamber, and really understanding the environment that you're serving is important. But what I really want to foot stomp here is we're not going to have an industry if we don't train the people internally and externally that we need for these jobs. So we need to look, into STEM education and supporting STEM education. We need to look at universities and colleges and how are they implementing curriculums to help us with teaching these data service providers how they're going to do their jobs. How are we going to work with AI correctly with integrity? And how are we going to show up, IoT and all of these things? It's not just flying a drone. The drone is the tool. It's all the things around it too. We all know this. I'm saying things everybody knows, but I really, having started at a flight school, training is everything, and training the trainer. We need people to come forward who want to train all of these folks that are going to help our industry grow and help our investors feel really good about continuing to give us money.
So what happens without that, Amy? I mean, because there's smart people out there. You can plug, why not just plug and play someone who has expertise in something else, but maybe hasn't encountered, drone or aviation or whatever. What is the risk, I guess, of not having people deeply integrated and familiar across the board, just plugging into jobs and trying to scale from there? Lacking the training, lacking the certifications. I'm just curious.
Would you want somebody who's not a plumber fixing your plumbing?
Probably
Would you
not.
want somebody fixing your electricity who doesn't know how to fix your electricity? Now, given there's going to be instances where we're going to train internally. We want that. A lot of times that's really a good way to do it because they don't have those bad habits. But I think what you need to do right now within this year, this 10 months to a year, is how can you become authorities in this area that's getting ready to shift and pivot? And we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to land, but we have a really good idea and we can start making plans to move to that so that we're seen as authorities to the people who need us for our services and products.
That's the bottom line right there. None of us know how to do all the things.
No.
And we all have certain things that we're very passionate about, that we've curated a skill set over years to be there in that space.
Yes.
And what we learned is that this particular industry touches many different spaces. So the conversation today has allowed us to kind of open up that aperture and see on the business side that having the business chops means all of the things that we talked about today. It's not just being able to write a proposal. It's not just being able to do your own payroll, right? It's all of these other things. And if you are that entrepreneur and you are, you're passionate about this gadget that you're building, whatever it is, rock on, do that. But go find someone like these folks who have the chops to be able to help you with those other facets of your business so that you can you get those force multipliers and you can move forward faster. I think it's a beautiful thing.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, I do want to hear some final well, maybe that was some of your final thoughts.
That
but
was
I'd
my
love
final
to,
thought.
Okay, it was. I have to shout out really quick because I should have done it earlier, but we dove right in and the conversation was just brilliant. But thank you, flight crew members, for this episode who shared and who are just incredible partners of the podcast. And Andrew Bowen, TAC is the way, of course, UAV pilot, and Zeb Nadler, the one and only, also amazing when it comes to implementing TAC and supporting drone responders. So go check those guys out, follow them as well. Those are some of my best buds in the industry. But with that said, Abby, put you on the spot. Final thoughts for folks out there listening in.
Okay.
Take a
Yeah.
minute or two. Go for it.
So, David, I mean, I think, so I think the really important thing is you're only limited by your creativity and by the people in the ecosystem that you don't reach out to. And test sites such as the New York UAS test site at Oneida County, and integrators, engineers that have a lot of deep experience in the field, like AX Enterprise, are really important. If you're interested in help with your FAA and federal network, I'm a good resource. If you're interested in the business side of it, AIM is your resource. If you're interested in enterprise sandbox, big picture,
Oh,
Michelle, did it come back?
sorry. Yep. You were just saying Michelle's Sandbox Enterprise, and then we lost you.
Boy, I'm going to use that for a
okay,
long
all
time.
right. Yeah. So, and David, a shout out to you. We were talking about the fact that Amy was talking about getting outside of your comfort zone, not just your network, but your ecosystem. You got out of your comfort zone, did an interview with me, and you brought me business, and I in turn help you close a big sale. And so it was just an example of doing things differently to get different results. So kudos to you, man.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you. Amy, do you have anything you want to leave with people?
Yeah.
Advice, thoughts, where they can reach you, anything around that.
Sure. Amy at earhartalden.com is where you can reach me. And my information is everywhere. In fact, if you go to my LinkedIn page, you can even see my phone number. It's right on the header there. I'm not a secret. And I'd love to talk to you. But really, I mean, just stay focused on this transition and how you can excel within your space inside this transition, understanding your client, understanding how this transition is going to impact them. Leverage your networks, get outside your ecosystem, look at the training opportunities, look at where you can give back to your community and help them understand. Our community's embracing this technology is going to be super important. So talk the good talk about Drones for Good. This is going to be an interesting time for all of us. So hold on, because it's coming. I feel it.
That's good. And the picture that I feel like you're painting for me is this sense of like all ships rising, with the tide.
Yes.
And I say this a lot, but it's like you want to burn a fire so big that even your competitors come there to get warm.
Yes.
I've heard some say, just
I
with
love
this
that
sense of like, let's give and network and reach out, as opposed to kind of locking inward and holding cards close, right? And then there's something obviously to competition, and there's certain things you don't share outside of your organization, but so much of this is just having the same North Star. It's like we're all on the same team. We're all trying to see, the future become reality, make lives better, safer, get, blood transfusions done quicker, limit how many massive delivery trucks are coming down my little private drive to like the 3 houses down here that could run over my little kids, like 3 or 4 big trucks a day down my little drive for 3 houses. It's crazy. Imagine if those were drones, that would just creating much more peace of mind for me with my kid, so the future is bright. Even Part 108, all of this movement is going to unlock so many cool things. But I do think sharing the fact that we're on the same team and kind of sharing that North Star as the big, the big driver, then let's work together, and we could be even if you call it frenemies, I don't care, whatever, but let's just we will see all the ships rise. To your point, Amy, you know, if you're a business but you invest in the community in terms of jobs, you know, and like what we, you know, certification programs, and that's maybe outside of just what will serve you, as just one example. But now you're seeing the entire community elevate. Maybe your kids end up going to that training 10 years later or whatever. You know, depends on how old your kids are. Mine are, you know, 7, 5, 3, you know. But maybe I helped develop a program that in 15 years, one of my, you know, my 3-year-old son ends up getting trained to be a, you know, certified pilot or whatever the case. So I love it. Brilliant advice, ladies. I thank all 3 of you for your impact on this industry as I'm learning and growing as well. So appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Abby, Michelle, David. I really appreciate all of you. Thanks for all who tuned in too and taking your time to spend with us.
Yeah, and thank you, AX Enterprise, for powering this episode. Couldn't do it without you. Go check them out. All right, guys. With that, we'll close it out. We'll see you again live next week.